Hey everyone, welcome to or welcome back to my channel. It's the Worm Whisperer here. I'm back with a brand new video today, and I'm going to go over how to turbocharge your worm tea and get the most life living in it and beneficial organisms to make it the best for your plants. Stay tuned. And as always, if you like my videos, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. Alright, so we're going to get started with a very rich source of nitrogen for our tea, and that's using blood meal. Blood meal is very easy to source in your local garden center. It's not hard to find, and it makes a great amendment to start your tea with. So the reason why blood meal is such a great addition to your tea mix is because it is a food source for the bacteria, the fungi, the algae, and the nematodes, the protozoa, and all the viral compounds that you find in your tea, and that's what you're trying to create within your tea. So we're going to take some of this blood meal and we're going to mix it in with our unchlorinated water. That's very important. You don't want to have any chlorine in your water. That's going to defeat the whole purpose of this tea and it'll definitely kill these things that you're trying to create within your tea. So I just put a little bit in and I mix it around with my finger at this point. I'll get a stir stick later, as you'll see. But at this point, I'm just going to mix it around a little bit with my finger and get it mixed in there really well. So our next turbocharging amendment will be insect frass we'll be adding to our tea. And what insect frass is it's a poop of insects. So what this does for our tea is this is going to return a lot of the beneficial microbes that have been ingested by the insects back into our tea. And this is going to help our tea come to life. So what's so turbocharging about insect frass? Well, along with the nutrients, insect frass also contains something called chitin. And this is an important component for keeping plant cells walls strong. These stronger cell walls help fend off pests and disease. It also seems to make the plant resistant to powdery mildew, which is really important to keep off your flowers and your vegetables later on in the season. Okay, so we're going to take some of this and we're going to put it into our tea mix, and then we're going to mix it around with our finger a little bit again and get it mixed in there really well. Okay, so our next amendment is going to be a bunch of amendments, and that's going to be a really good organic multi-mix. I like to use Gaia Green here in Canada. You can use something like Down to Earth in the US. That'll work great too. I like to stir some of this in to add some more nutrient-rich organic amendments to our tea. Okay, so our next amendment that we're going to use is seaweed. I like to use the dry soluble seaweed that I get around here, although you can use the liquid seaweed, works just as well. So what's the benefit of using seaweed in our turbocharged tea? Well, when researchers use seaweed in their garden, they found that their geraniums produce more flowers per plant, grapes that they planted were sweeter, and cucumbers yield an increase of 40%, and the fruits and vegetables also suffered less from softening and rotting. So as you can see, using seaweed in your tea is a big advantage. So that's why we're going to use it in our turbocharged tea. So the next very important amendment in our turbocharged tea is blackstrap molasses. What this does is it encourages the growth of beneficial organisms within our tea. Make sure you don't use any molasses that has a sodium content contained in it. Blackstrap molasses in our tea will provide the plants with a quick source of energy. It's also high in calcium, magnesium, iron, and potassium, all useful in our tea. So unlike our previous amendments, I like to stir this molasses in really well and make sure that it gets mixed into the tea. This is one of the more important things that we're going to add. So while we're mixing this, you probably noticed that I don't use one of those mesh bags to put all my products into. I don't really see the purpose of using that unless you're going to use your tea for something like a foliar spray or something like that. It doesn't seem to make much sense to me to use that. I like to put all my stuff into the actual tea mix itself, and that way when I add it to the plants, I'm able just to put all that extra onto my plants, and it adds a nice organic layer to the top of the soil. So the next amendment I'm going to use is a bit of an organic base cow mag. I like to use this. I find it's very helpful to maximize yields in fruiting and flowering plant varieties. It also helps to prevent blossom end rot in your tomatoes and peppers and can reduce tip burn in lettuce. So I like to add a very tiny little bit of this just to give it that extra little boost to help with these things. So one of the last amendments that I like to use is Big Bloom from Fox Farm. Big Bud is made up of earthworm castings, bat guano, seabird guano, and rock phosphate. All great things to add to your tea. I like to add it because it adds that extra little kick to my tea, and I found that it works really well for me over the last 10 or so years that I've been using it. I like to add approximately 1 capful of Big Bloom, as you'll see here. Okay, so moving on to our last and most important amendment of all is a nice handful of homemade worm castings that I produced in my worm farm. Using these worm castings will inoculate our tea and turbocharge it with oxygen-loving bacteria, nematodes, protozoa, and fungi. Whether you make them or have to buy your own, this is one of the most important elements to your tea. Now that we've added all our elements to our tea and mixed it up really good, we're going to need to add an oxygen source to this tea. This oxygen will help to stir our tea mix and will also help to benefit growing the type of organisms that we want in this tea to make it beneficial for the plant. You will want to get a good strong pump to use for this. So now that our tea is ready to go, we need to do one last thing, and that's add a cover to the tea. You want to keep it in the dark until we check it again in 24 hours. Okay, so now that it's been 24 hours, let's take a peek here and see how it's doing. As you can see, it's been bubbling away, and it's obviously mixed up really well. You can see that there's a lot of bubbles on top, and that's from the bubbler and also all the great oxygen-loving things that are in this tea right now that are going to help your plants. At this point, I usually do a sniff test where I'll go down and I'll take a little sniff of the tea just to make sure it smells right. You don't want it to smell rotten, and you don't want to have a bad or chemical smell to it. What it should smell like is it should smell a little bit sweet from the molasses, and it should also smell a little bit earthy at this point. Now that 48 hours have passed and we are ready to use our new tea. As you can see, this tea has darkened up a bit from the mixing, so you could use this tea as is. It will not burn the plants. However, I like to dilute the tea to get the most out of it. Normally, depending on the plants I'm using it on, I will dilute the tea at 4 parts water to 1 part tea. I use this tea about every 2 weeks on my fruiting and flowering plants with great results. So that'll wrap up our turbocharged tea lesson. I hope everybody enjoyed it and will give this tea a try for some extra happy and healthy plants. If you like my tutorials, please like and subscribe, and thank you for joining me. Have a great day.